I am just going to posit a few provocative questions in the context of us sharing in the traditional territories of First Nations. When we talk about public spaces, whose spaces are these for, and are we talking about as well? And how can newcomers properly acknowledge or learn about the unique relations of First Nations? And also we are all sharing in part of the traditional territories. Is it kind of just a ceremonial gesture when we invite an elder to open a significant discussion like today? And how does the acknowledgement of this contribution would foster a newcomer's sense of belonging, which Ben talked about, from the aspect of intercultural relations?
So first of all, I'll just provide a little bit of background with regards to the city, and I'll do this really quickly because I know time is of the essence. The city of New Westminster has experienced an increase in immigration, and just as an example of how rapid that's occurring, between 2001 and 2006, increases in the immigrant population comprised 79.1% of total population growth. So as a city, and our immigrant population is now well over a third, this has really challenged the city with regards to how we can be more inclusive of this population and maximize their contributions. So the city, with regards to settlement and integration agencies, did apply for a community partnership development grant. We developed a charter from that grant. And based on that charter, we developed a project called Reach Out New Westminster, Greet, Inform, and Connect. And those three components were essential. With regards to the projects, and each one of them relate to one of those three components, we have a Gateway Ambassador project, which really greets individuals as they come to New West, and that's the greet component. We have a Newcomers Guide, which we're developing, which will be specific to New Westminster, and that's the Inform. And we have an immigrant mentorship program, which is a way of connecting immigrants with service providers and also with regards to the city and services within the city, and that's the Connect component. And together, these three components and these projects are equipping and empowering newcomers to become more engaged and involved in New Westminster, while at the same time informing them that their contributions are both welcome and important. And just from the city's perspective, because I think cities are starting to play a more involved role with regards to this area around welcoming inclusive communities. Some initiatives that the city is undertaking, we assisted in the development of the charter and the demonstration project. We're coordinating the Welcoming Inclusive New Westminster Working Group, which is overseeing these projects. We're holding meetings to assist in agency collaboration and service coordination, recognizing that we have to bring all the different agencies into the tent to work together. We're informing the development of the Newcomers Guide and assisting in the training of both ambassadors and mentors, and we're providing meeting spaces and venues. And I shouldn't say this doesn't underplay the importance of the settlement integration agencies, because they've been at the table and they're really driving the process, but we see ourselves as more of a supportive role. And just to conclude, the city is also reviewing its policies, procedures, spaces, programs, and services to ensure that they are supportive of a welcoming, inclusive community. And this is a community which truly welcomes and includes newcomers. Thank you.
Now, to go to the question, what I want to say is that one of the purposes, I guess, in taking the asset mapping approach for a group of women that we were involved in as part of my work in Mount Pleasant Neighborhood House, it was to help the communities to think also in terms of their wealth, in terms of people and things and services and the resources that they were already in the community rather than going to look for it outside the community. As well as the resources within themselves, the skills, the knowledge, the experience that they had. The other, I guess, reason behind this was to build from what we have that requires asking different questions around, meaning different questions to define in order what is, for example, service provision, or what is child care from their perspective, what is the meaning of that to them, rather than to be drawing from some of the definitions that are already out there. The women that were involved in this project were from at least 6 different countries. They were from Bangladesh, from China, from Iran, from Colombia, from Chile, and from Mexico. And what they did is they practically started from scratch in the sense that they were able to put in their own words what their approach was, why did they chose the approach, what was the approach was. And for example, they said in their own words that this approach was to, the approach they chose was based in finding and sharing these services that were already there, the resources that they already had, but also from a humane and sensitive and inclusive perspective, as well as finding services and resources that open opportunities for them as immigrants and services that do not stereotype them as immigrants, and in turn kind of perpetuating the challenges that we face as immigrants and the barriers that we face.
This project, the Downtown Peninsula Intercultural Community Gardens project, started with a number of community agencies coming together and looking at ways to make the Downtown Peninsula a more welcoming and inclusive place. Out of that discussion, and there were many, many agencies, there were three organizations, the YMCA, Gordon Neighbourhood House, and the West End Residents Association that came together to work with the Intercultural Community Gardens. So we recognized the inherent appeal of gardening in that food production is part of every culture, and that the gardens themselves are places that are informal, walkable kinds of spaces where people can come together. However, we also felt from the experience in the community that we've had that it was important to be intentional about what we wanted to accomplish. In other words, just saying we're going to have gardens was not necessarily going to create the intercultural exchange that we felt we wanted to have happen. So with the project, one of the first places that we started is we said in terms of selection of the gardeners, we wanted to have at least 50 plots. We said in order to represent the socio-demographic reality of the community, 40% of those should be immigrants. So we stated that at the onset. Then we had to go on and do community outreach. We needed to promote this in a way that would get the diversity in the community. I also want to just speak to something else about the Downtown Peninsula. It is a very complex diversity. So there's a real blend of ethnocultural groups. Socioeconomically, you have very wealthy people and you also have very poor people. There are many kinds of diversities. As many of you would know, there's a very vibrant LGBTQ community that's there. So we wanted to engage all of that diversity. We also recognize that even though people live in that small space together, that they often live in a very siloed way. So the point of the gardens was to use them as a vehicle to build community capacity, to build social cohesion, and promote civic engagement. So we decided we wanted to have 40% that were immigrants. In very practical terms, that meant going out and doing outreach in a way we, in all honesty, don't often do in our organizations. It meant translating promotional materials, getting those materials into all kinds of places. So for example, getting promotional materials in Farsi in Iranian groceries. So making sure that people were being reached. And I can mention at this point, I live and work in the Downtown Peninsula. I have attended many meetings that have to do with housing or rezoning or various issues that are very important to the whole community. It is extremely rare to see the whole community represented there. So it really takes that step in terms of outreach, of ensuring that the whole community comes in and is part of these processes. Once we had the recruitment piece done, in order to actually get a plot or be eligible to get a plot, people had to go through some training. So we had a community dialogue that dealt with intercultural communication and inclusive communication. We also had a full day of diversity training that dealt with intercultural communication, with anti-homophobia and anti-racism. I should mention we had 50 plots, or we hoped to have 50 plots. We had about 100 people come in for training, so there were lots of people that were just interested in the training, which I think is great. I mean, it shows there's some demand for that out there, and we could be providing more of that. And the other thing that was so great is we did have some people that sort of grumblingly went along and went, why do I have to give up a Saturday for this training? You know, I want to just garden. Nobody that went through, like, with the exception of one person, out of that 100, or actually more than 100, nobody went through that training and left grumbling. They all left saying, this was really interesting, this was really worthwhile.
In my particular beef, I really have a problem with inclusion in the sense that I don't want to be included into something because really what that suggests is I'm fitting into something that exists, and that room is being made for me to fit into something that exists, and it doesn't imply, suggest, or often allow the parameters of that thing to grow and shift, and for me to just to affect it in a meaningful way, or to fully participate, unless I'm conforming to the space I'm invited into.
And another one would be logistical, so not always expecting youth to come to what we as adults deem to be a public space or a welcoming place, but more so going to where youth are. I think that applies to any section of the population. So, you know, instead of saying that group should come here, it's more of going to them. And then the last one is that we're constantly challenged by the barriers that we're living in. So if we're doing an anti-racism training or a diversity workshop in schools, we're having to fight against curriculum that in itself is oppressive, and it's based on Eurocentric or colonized frameworks already. So to have short workshops or to have projects that can only do a small amount is sometimes challenging. But just to end off, the successes, I think, come from when we're able to link our projects together. So not just having a one-off pilot thing that ends, but being able to build on the work that we've previously done, the relationships that we already have, and to, even though it's something new, to work with youth and spaces that we know are already willing to be engaged.
But I think someone raised the question earlier, you know, who is the public that we're talking about, or which public, or I can't remember the precise formulation. I just like to say that we are all the public, and that is something that needs to remain at the core of the way that we think about public space. It's not somebody else's space, it's not their space, it's not the other person's space. We're all urban citizens, we are the public, and it's our space collectively.